Hey guys, how's it going? It's Pocket, and this is the second part of the MacBook Pro 15-inch 2018 review. So in this video, we're going to pretty much go ahead and test the MacBook to see whether it can play games, whether it handle 4K videos, whether there are any issues, and of course, the most important, is it actually worth it to buy now, or perhaps wait for the next MacBook Pro to release next year. So let's go straight to the video. Just a quick side note, this MacBook Pro has a 2.2 GHz 6-core i7 processor with 16 GB of RAM and the AMD Radeon Pro 555X graphics card. Furthermore, if you haven't watched the first part of this video, please go ahead and watch it, since this is where I cover all the features of this MacBook Pro. Okay, good, cool, good, excellent. The first test we're going to perform is by using Geekbench 4. Geekbench 4 is used to measure the speed of the processor by giving a score. In order to get more accurate results, we have to make sure there are no other programs running on the background, apart from Intel Gadget, since he gives us in real time how fast the processor is running, as well as other information such as temperature. During the test, as you can see, the frequency of the processor is going up and down, and that's due because the MacBook is getting warmer, and hence, in order to prevent the temperature of rising, it has to reduce the speed of the processor in order to reduce the temperature. This is also called as thermothrottling. Speaking for the processor itself, during the test, it had frequency of around 2.9 to 3 GHz on average, and spiking up to 4.0 GHz sometimes, and its temperature being well above 75 Celsius most of the time and spiking at 98 degrees. So the next time you're about to boil water, a kettle won't be needed. Finally, for one core we get 4963, and for all 6 cores together we get 21,973. Now this is an improvement compared to the score they list on the official Geekbench 4 website, but this makes me think whether the score was before the update or after the update which fixed the thermothrottling issue. Now if it's before, these are great news, since you're going to notice the difference of your computer running faster by 4 to 5%. Next, we're going to find the score of the graphics card of this MacBook Pro. This MacBook Pro contains the AMD Radeon 555X with 4 GB of RAM. Finally, it scores 46,541, which is 10,000 points less than the other configuration, the 560X option, with the same gigabytes of memory. Moving on to Cinema 4D Cinebench. In this case, we're going to test the processor, how fast can it render a high quality image. We're going to perform 5 tests in order to get the average score, so I can give you a better perspective on how fast can it perform in more intensive tasks for a longer period of time. Finally, we get the results of the 5 tests we have done, highest being 1035 and lowest 974, and the overall score being 998. As you can see, this MacBook Pro is going to run at its fastest when it's cool, but in daily usage you're probably not going to see the difference, since the difference is going to be only 3 to 5%. The speed of the processor was averaging at 3 to 3.1 GHz and the temperature was very close to 100 degrees. Moving on to OpenGL, this is going to test how fast can it run this simulation by counting the frames per second on average. Again, we're going to do 5 tests in order to get the average so we can get a more accurate score. Finally, we get the results of all 5 tests, so the highest being 88.47 and the lowest being 84.3, so everything averages at 85.722. Again, the cause of the downfall is because the computer is getting warmer and warmer, and again, I performed the test without taking any break between them. Moving on to Heaven, we're going to run a high resolution game scene and measure the average frame rate, including the lowest and the highest frame rate throughout the simulation. On the top right corner you have the frame rate and below you have the current temperature of the processor. Skipping to the results, we get a 17.7 average frame rate for the whole simulation and a score of 447. The highest frames per second recorded was 38.5 and the minimum frames per second was 6.9. However, don't let that fool you, since that was the highest resolution possible. Moving on to a lower resolution preset with 720p resolution, we get a far better score of 61.9 frames per second on average, with score of 1558, with a minimum frame rate of 14.5 and a highest frame rate possible spiking at 103.8. This tells me that this MacBook Pro can run latest games at a lower resolution settings. However, I can't go anywhere without showing you how it can play Fortnite. Initially, we're gonna go ahead and play with the recommended settings. While playing it, I would say that it runs pretty well. It's not perfect, it's not bad, but it can definitely run it alright. Sometimes you may experience some lagging issues, but this is because this game is not optimized for Mac. Unfortunately, there's nothing much going on right now. A low frame rate which you could experience is being at around 24. However, the frame rate can exceed 30 if you get into a house in an enclosed area. Now let's move on and max out all the settings to see how well can it run. Unfortunately, it's not so well, since the frame rate has dropped below 20 on average, and this has reduced the game experience dramatically, since there's a delay on any action I do on the mouse or on the keyboard. It's not terrible, but you could have played better if you had lower settings. Unfortunately, this game is not fully optimized for a Mac, and it's going to be a very bad idea to get a MacBook Pro in order to play games. But if you really want to get a MacBook Pro, you should consider getting the 560X instead, which is going to be an extra $100. In the end, I'm not going to say that this is a gaming machine, but you can definitely enjoy playing your favorite games and even the latest ones. But for the latest ones, make sure to lower the resolution to a comfortable level in order to average 30 frames per second at minimum in order to have a good gaming experience. Moving on to video editing, this MacBook Pro can handle 4K videos pretty well. Now, using Adobe Premiere Pro, you can edit and preview live your 4K footage with almost without lag. However, if you start adding effects and changing the speed of a specific clip, then you're going to notice some lag and some delay in playing that clip. But when there are problems, there are always going to be alternatives and solutions. So in this case, we have the competitor Final Cut Pro, which is a perfect software for video editing for Mac users and can do the job perfectly. In this case, we're using Final Cut Pro, and as you can see, even quick footages can be played without any lag. Moving on to a render comparison between those two video editing softwares, first we have the Adobe Premiere Pro with my favorite rendering settings, so maximum depth, maximum rendering quality, and the final format being H264. Okay, so the rendering has just started and we get a final time of 40 minutes, and that's quite long to be honest. But it doesn't stop there. Final Cut Pro is also joining the game, and with the same settings, format being H264, we are getting a much better rendering time. With 6 minutes and 47 seconds in completely thrusts Adobe Premiere Pro, making it almost 6 times faster than Adobe Premiere Pro. And the quality is the same, so guys, if you're going to buy a MacBook Pro, make sure to consider Final Cut Pro as well. It's a perfect software for Macs and it's going to save you a lot of time rendering stuff, and if you make a mistake then it's going to take you much less time than it will with Adobe Premiere Pro. Okay, cool, so let's move on the last test, which is going to be disk speed test. So right now we're going to test how fast can the MacBook Pro read and write on the SSD. So as you can see, it can write with speeds of up to 1700 megabytes per second and read up to 2600 megabytes per second, which are great speeds compared to its predecessor, the 2017 model. Again, this is the 512 gigabytes model, and I've heard that the 1 terabyte model is a bit faster than this, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyways, and I have actually noticed that it can open multiple apps really quickly, and most important of all, it can boot in seconds. It's incredible, it's really fast. Overall, this is a great laptop to have, but we have to discuss about the downside that it has and some other things which could affect you. Number one, and most important issue is the thermal throttling issue. This MacBook Pro, including the 13-inch, can get hot really quickly, especially while you're doing heavy tasks requiring a lot of processing power. This MacBook Pro could hit at around 100 degrees Celsius, which is really high. So the best bet is to keep updating your MacBook Pro to the latest software version, since Apple is still looking for ways to fix this issue even further, even though they have already made an update. Next is crackling noises on the speakers. Since Apple has upgraded the speakers on the new MacBook Pro, giving you better sound quality and experience while listening to music or watching movies, but not until starting hearing some crackling noises appear suddenly from your speakers. However, don't worry much about it, since this is not a hardware issue at my opinion, it's more like a software issue. And the reason why I know it is because since I already have this issue, if I reboot my MacBook Pro, the crackling noises will disappear, but they will appear after a couple of hours of long usage. But if it was a hardware issue, then I will constantly experience this issue since I got this MacBook Pro. So this is my perspective. And I hope Apple is going to fix it as soon as possible, because many people have been talking about it. Next, the keyboard. Now there's not an issue with the keyboard, but since Apple has said that it's going to be quieter, many people have been complaining that it's not quiet but it still makes noise while you're typing. However, other people think that it's quieter than the previous version of 2017. Since the keyboard is different than what most people have been used to, it's going to take them a while to get used to it, and that makes them not liking this keyboard. But in my perspective now, I like this keyboard since I got used to it, and I can literally type faster than I used to. So if you hate this keyboard, don't worry. On the first 1 or 2 days, you may find it difficult to type and get used to, but after 2 days, you'll be typing faster than you used to. And finally, there are some random downsides which you might make you think twice before you buy this MacBook Pro. So first of all, it doesn't have the MagSafe, so that means that you have to use one of the Thunderbolt 3 ports in order to charge your laptop. Also, please keep in mind that it only has 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports and 1 headphone jack. Luckily, Apple hasn't removed it yet. That means it doesn't have HDMI, USB or SD card slot. So these are abandoned from the new MacBook Pro series, unfortunately. So you have to rely on adapters in order to get this functionality. Right down in the description, I list my own adapter I'm using. And lastly is a touch bar. Not many people like the touch bar since they believe that it takes too much time in order to use it rather than the function keys. In my perspective, I like the touch bar and I believe that it has more functionalities than the standard function keys since you can always access them using the FN key. And here we are to the final stage of this video discussing which MacBook Pro should you buy. Now, if you're a student or the basic user who only wants to browse, check his emails, watch videos, watch movies, listen to music and all those basic stuff, then you should consider getting the MacBook Pro 13-inch model. Now, if you want to spend only very little amount of money, the least amount of money, then you can get the one without the touch bar, starting at $300. However, if you want extra power on your MacBook Pro, then you should get the first quad-core processor MacBook Pro 13-inch with a touch bar, starting at $1,800. Next up, if you're a designer and you love making videos, then the 15-inch MacBook Pro will be the perfect choice for you. And the reason why I'm saying this is because you have a larger screen, so more content can fit in there and you can do your work much better. Not to mention that it comes with a 6-core processor, i7 with 2.2 and 2.6 GHz, and i9 processor with 2.9 GHz. But again, if you want to have a small laptop carrying with you, then make sure to get the 13-inch but with 16 GB of RAM and the fastest processor. And lastly, before closing this video, I would like to tell you some things to consider before buying the new MacBook Pro. First things first, please don't buy a MacBook Pro with more than 1 TB of storage because it gets really expensive very quickly. While you can save that money to get a phone or something else more important instead, including an external hard drive. Below I'm listing one of the best SSDs with the best value of money which you can buy right now. Next up, I don't believe that the i9 processor is much faster than the i7 processor 2.2 GHz. The difference is pretty small at around 7 to 10% difference. Only choose the i9 processor only if you want to get a bit of extra power on your MacBook Pro, and of course you have a spare $400. Finally, for the first time, Apple allows you to choose 32 GB of RAM on your new MacBook Pro. However, I don't believe this is much worth it right now since not even 16 GB of RAM is a commonplace right now. But if you do very intense job, you have many applications open, or if you are a designer and you have Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects open, and perhaps you want to make a video, so Adobe Premiere Pro open as well, all at the same time, then the 32 GB of RAM is going to be the perfect option for you. Otherwise, stick with 16 GB for now. But keep in mind that you cannot change the RAM later on, so make sure to choose wisely. And finally, the AMD Radeon Pro 560X is quite worth it for the money since the difference is going to be at around 15%. But this is only if you like playing games on your MacBook Pro, so the best graphics card is going to be a better choice for you and you're gonna see the difference. In the end, it's a great laptop to have which can literally replace your desktop as well. It might be a bit expensive, but in my opinion it's definitely worth it. But make sure to pick wisely which configurations you want because you cannot change anything after the purchase. In my perspective, I chose the cheapest MacBook Pro 15-inch, but the only difference, I got the 512 GB of storage. And to be honest, it's perfect. I've used it for 1 week. It does my job great. So what kind of computer do you have? Do you have a Mac? And what kind of configurations do you have? What kind of specs? Please make sure to list them down in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so, and the like button, and share this video to your friends if you want to help them out to find the best MacBook Pro and get a better view of the new MacBook Pro 2018. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'm gonna see you to my next video.